Dillon, defensive lineman, class of 2019, University at Albany.
Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Lakendra Red Smith. I am the Health Sector Director of Project Transition Incorporated under the leadership of Dr. Joaquin Wallace. Here we have with us today, joining us for our interview series where we interview high-performing athletes and their transitions through life and their careers. I have Nick Dillon with us. How are you, Nick?
I'm great. I appreciate you guys having me on, so I'm excited.
That's awesome. I understand that you're a football player. You were a former football player at the University of Albany. You've had a stellar career. And if you don't mind, would you introduce yourself to our listeners and our audience?
Yeah, no problem. Just like you said, so my name's Nick Dillon. I'm from the North Shore, Chicago, Illinois. I went to Stevenson High School in the Midwest, Illinois. From there, spent a couple of semesters at Eastern Michigan and then transferred to University at Albany, where I was a 4-year starter over there, studied organizational communication and business management.
That's awesome. So what do you do right now for your preferred career?
Yeah, so right now, I was getting my MBA at University of Illinois, Chicago, where I studied real estate finance as my concentration. Prior to that, I was working as a project engineer for about 3 years for a large commercial builder in Chicago named W.E. O'Neill Construction. So project engineer, that's, mid-senior level project manager. And then I'm looking to transition to the real estate finance space on either development or private equity.
Awesome. So I did a little research. I was digging. It took a lot. You were actually a 3-star athlete coming out of high school.
Yeah. I was a 3-star athlete coming out of high school. I had a substantial amount of offers and mostly like mid-major max schools, couple schools on the West Coast, but ultimately led to me committing to Coach Creighton. Great staff over there at Eastern Michigan, and my family, we decided to make that commitment.
So what factors impacted your decision to attend Eastern Michigan?
I think for me, man, it was a crazy time. A lot of these schools, they give out a bunch of offers and they'll only have like 3 spots open, right? So I was a defensive tackle about, 60, 70 pounds ago. So they'll offer like, I don't know, if there's a nose tackle and a 3-tech position open, they'll offer a bunch of kids, right? But they'll only take 2 commits in that class or 4 commits, whatever it is. So I waited a good amount of time and, I had all these offers and then I watched a lot of them, I'd call some schools and I'd be ready to commit, Bowling Green, Toledo, whatever it is. And they already took some commitments already. So it narrowed down to a few schools and then it just felt right with Eastern Michigan. I think my parents more than anything wanted me to go there with Coach Creighton and just his infrastructure over there. And then I had gotten along with some of the recruiting class. So ultimately we led to commit to Eastern Michigan. I think in hindsight, I could have taken a little bit slower just because, like you said, I was a 3-star. So, I'm not an All-American, but at the same time, that's a pretty highly recruited athlete coming out of high school. So it would have worked out. I think that given where I ended up at University of Albany, all things led to the right path.
So I noticed you and your family did something that the average African-American athlete does not do when you take in consideration recruitment, school selection, those type of things. I noticed that your family decided to take unofficial visits to very high level institutions. Like, how did that impact your decision? What you look for in, as far as environment and culture in the school? Because if I'm not mistaken, your visit from Iowa was really great.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. So my recruiting process was interesting. So all the schools that I was talking to was high major schools. So I'm talking to Iowa, Ohio State, some schools on the East Coast and the ACC. And I'm not talking to any of the schools that were giving me scholarship offers, which is unusual. So, my coach would pull me aside and say, hey, Western Michigan or Kent State, whatever it is, they offer you a scholarship. And I'm like, I haven't even talked to this school. Meanwhile, I'm talking to Chris Ash from Ohio State and all these guys recruiting me. So it was a little bit strange in that regard, just having all my interest was coming from high majors, but the offers are coming from mid majors. So that was another part of the process that was a little bit confusing for me and my family. But nevertheless, I was giving those schools the most attention, right? Because they're giving me the most attention, even though I'm not getting scholarships from them. So we went to Iowa. That was a fantastic visit. KF and his staff, they really took time and got to know me before I even stepped foot on campus. They knew my mother's first name. They knew my father's first name. I haven't gotten a scholarship from them. They were at Stevenson a lot. Great staff, wonderful people over there. And my mom wanted me to go there, quite honestly, but they never offered. So that was interesting. I went to Ohio State. I went to Syracuse, a bunch of high major schools, but ultimately it came down to the schools that was giving me scholarship offers. One other part that played into really was, so I'm about 6'1¾". I like to say just 6'2" for simplicity. A lot of the defensive tackles are like 6'4", you know what I'm saying, without shoes on. So I was a little bit undersized height-wise, but I believe I could make up for that with my quickness, athleticism, things of that such. But some of these big schools just weren't willing to pull the trigger, but the MAC schools, mid-majors, were ready to go. So that's kind of what happened that way. But the Iowa visit was fantastic. Ohio State was amazing. You know, some of these big schools that I took, Illinois. But yeah, that's just kind of how it shook out.
Yeah, I always think it's kind of important. Sometimes you just have to like who likes you back.
True.
So what advice would you give current athletes now, considering how your recruitment process went? What advice would you give current athletes, just little nuggets for them to navigate the recruiting trail a little bit easier, especially in the world of names, image, and likeness?
Well, when I was playing, we didn't have NIL. I wish they did. I would have ran that up. But no, I think with the NIL, that's a really big component into the equation, right? And I think that what I would say is, you know, it's really important. Obviously, you want to take that into consideration with your family. Some people come from areas where, you know, that could really change their lives, right? Especially if you're a really high recruited athlete. But I would say don't forget about why you're going to these schools. I think number one is education. I mean, that's a huge thing, because at the end of the day, you know, you could play in the NFL for 2 years, 10 years, 15 years. It's going to end at some point. So making sure that you have a fallback plan and establishing why you're going to school in the first place, education-wise, I think that's huge. Because for me, you know, I had Ivy League offers. I think not Ivy League opportunities. I don't even know if they give scholarship offers, but they're Division I. They compete at the high level, even though it's D1 AA. At the end of the day, if you're nice, if you're a productive athlete, you're going to go and be a professional athlete, right? So sometimes it doesn't always matter about like, oh, I need to get to the ACC, I need to get to the Big Ten. Just take in consideration the academics as well too. Another thing, I would say that, you know, academics, you know, have that plan after you. The NFL should be the goal, right? The professional sports should be the goal. But what am I going to do? What's my foundation, my fallback plan after I'm done, right? Do I want to, you know, set up a business? You know, what field would I want to work in? Do I want to do broadcasting, whatever it might be, real estate like myself? So just having a large plan is very important, and think on a macro level, and not just like, I need to get to the NFL and play there for 4 years, 10 years, whatever it is, because you got to pay the bills and put food on the table. I would say definitely have a plan going in.
Yeah, what you mentioned is definitely one of the goals of Project Transition and the Project Success mentorship program that we've just recently implemented. So question, you sign with Eastern Michigan. Your parents want you to go to Eastern Michigan. Mm-hmm. You go to Eastern Michigan, and all of a sudden you play 4 years at Albany. So what transpired as to why you felt like it was in your best interest to leave your preferred, you know, university to transfer and clearly have a stellar career at the University of Albany?
I think at Eastern Michigan, you know, it was a great experience. Some of my really good friends, you know, went there and stayed there for 4 years, plus Max Crosby, Brody Hoynes of the world. But I think that for me, the school was really important for me in my experience as a student athlete. And I just felt like coming from Stevenson High School, that going into Eastern Michigan, that experience was just very different for me. And I felt like I wanted just a different environment. And I felt like I was kind of going down a path that I felt wasn't right for me, Nick Dillon, as a person, right? So I wanted to make a change. I want to switch up. And then, you know, you get into the whole transfer recruiting process. That's even different. You know, I had more scholarship offers when I was transferring than I did coming out of high school. I'm like, man, like, this is different. So one thing led to another, and University at Albany came up, and I'm like, I don't really know much about Albany, but I do know it is on the East Coast. I have a lot of family over there. And then I started doing some research, and their head coach, Coach Gattuso, you know, he's a defensive line guru, right? When I visited University of Maryland, he was a defensive line coach there, and also Coach Dzinski, Coach Duz, he was the linebacker coach. So I had some familiarity there. They had a ton of NFL experience in their coaching staff, and I was just ecstatic to get over there. Coach Clark, who now coaches at Robert Morris, and it was kind of written, and I was like, this is where I need to be. Not only that, but, you know, they had been itching to turn around the program and take it to the next level. Coach Bob Ford, you know, was basically the godfather over there, and Coach G was just picking it up up from where he left off. And I just thought that was a fantastic opportunity for me to help grow a program, further my education. And I'm on the East Coast. I'm with a different culture over there, and just a good, healthy change for me. So I got out of it what I thought I would get out of it. It was a fantastic experience.
Good stuff. So you hit your transition, you've transferred multiple schools, you've experienced the transfer portal, you've experienced these recruiting, the difficulties on the recruiting trail. What would you say was the biggest obstacle that you faced in your collegiate sport career?
The biggest obstacle, I would say the injuries. I say coming out of, in Stevenson, I was playing on a torn meniscus, and I didn't even know it until after the season, until I got scoped. So I went into Eastern Michigan already injured, recovering from an injury. And I think that also, when you compound an injury with being a little bit undersized, those affect the undersized kids a little bit more. So, I had that injury from high school going into college. And then, at Eastern Michigan, I had herniated 3 discs in my L5. So that was really tough, man. Like, that's another reason I was just like, after I had recovered from that, I had to make a change. I just needed a fresh start. So that was big, man. I was in a place that it wasn't conducive mentally. So, that was really tough at University of Albany. I was relatively healthy. There's some games that I missed, but at the end of the day, you're still beating your body up. You know what I'm saying? It's like, an apprentice for construction in the construction world. So that's another reason why they recruit these kids who are a little bit taller, a little bit larger, just because you can put your body through that. So I was going against, kids who are 6'5", 350 pounds. That's a lot on your body. But nevertheless, I persevered and was a captain and was productive on the field. But I would say the injuries, because, when you're watching your friends ball out and you're on the sideline for a couple of games, that does a lot for you, right? And it's like you got to come back even stronger than you were before. So I would say the injuries for sure.
What influence did you overcoming or dealing with these challenges with injuries have on your mental health?
I said it definitely had some impact there. Like I was saying, like at the end of the day, like everyone on your team, you have a built-in friend group, right? Well, especially we call it the Purple Fam at UAlbany, and I still talk to the boys this day. We got our group chat going. And I think that when you're seeing your friends out on the field have fun and stuff like that, and you can't contribute, that just sucks a little bit. And then it's like, I gotta not only recover, but I have to be even healthier than I was before. Because at the end of the day, they're recruiting kids to replace you, right? But that builds a lot of mental toughness, I think, because it's like that in the workplace as well too. It can be, right? So you're gonna face adversity. Things aren't always gonna go the way you think they're gonna go or want to go, and it's up to you to just claw back and bounce back. So I would say that.
So in hindsight, knowing what you know now about mental health and the importance of it, the significance, having exposure to resources, etc., what resources do you wish you had at your then that just weren't available to you, or you just weren't aware that they were available to you?
Well, I think Coach G did a great job, and Coach Creighton as well too. I'm a religious person. My faith is rooted in God and Christianity. So they did a great job of bringing in people like that. The local church, you could just on Thursdays or before games, just chop it up with them. They'll pray over you. So that was a big deal for me. But I think that I see some of these larger programs have mental health divisions within their football facilities, within their football organizations, and just have staff on hand that's not even concerned about the sport, that's there for the student athlete. Like if someone goes through an injury, if they're maybe trying to get back on their feet academically, if they're going through something personally with their families, someone to help out in that way and just be associated and, in front of the players that doesn't report back to the head coach is different on that way. So I think that resource, I'm starting to see that more. I think that's great for student athletes and just a staff that really cares about the kid. I remember when I was at University of Albany, the week before we played Central Michigan, my cousin had passed away, and that was really tough for me. I remember I didn't know what to do. I ran up to the coaching staff office and I just went in there. They were having a meeting and I was just bawling my eyes out. And I remember they just all put their arms around me and was there for me. So having a staff that really cares about the student athletes, that's really important. But also, mental health employees, the student athletes in particular, that's a great resource.
Understood. So you graduate from the University of Albany. at some point it hits you that your career is going to come to an end. Would you mind talking us through that thought process in that moment where it's like, hey, what am I going to do next?
That was crazy. That was a crazy time. And the reason it was a crazy time is because when we got done with our season, the last game I ever played, we played at Montana State. And then, there'd be scouts coming into practice all the time for some of my teammates. May not necessarily for me, just based on like productivity and stats and things of that such, which is okay. But you always want that opportunity, right, to have a pro day, because you can test out off the charts and then all of a sudden a team is looking at you and it's like, okay, let's just bring him in for a workout and see how he does. Workout can lead to a rookie minicamp. Rookie minicamp can lead to OTAs. OTAs can lead to 53 summer camp, and summer camp leads to 53-man roster. You know what I'm saying? So anything could happen. So for me, it was like we were getting ready for the pro day, gonna get prepared for it, and then COVID hit. And then they canceled the pro day. So that was like, man, like where I'm trying to go professionally, it's probably done. So I thought that was a sign from God of like, maybe it's time to move on. And then I was in a space mentally where I'm like trying to figure things out. So I ended up getting hired at a commercial builder on the East Coast. And my buddy, he played professional basketball in England. And he was like, hey man, you want to just come live with me for a little bit before you go into the corporate world? And I'm like, absolutely. So, I lived with him for a few months in Sheffield, which is just north of London, living with my buddy and played professional basketball. And then, that kind of transitioned me into the corporate world. But having that experience of COVID kind of taking some things away from me, and also a little bit of my relationships too, that was really tough because it's like we graduated, we were about to start training, and it was like, okay, no more, we're not doing a pro day, it's done with. And I was like, okay, like this is it. That was tough. It was tough to not share that experience with my teammates. It was tough to we all went our separate ways when COVID hit. So it was a tough time in my life, but it ended up transitioning into a great experience.
So what were your coping mechanisms in that moment to get through that challenge?
Like I said at the beginning of this interview, having a plan, you know what I'm saying? So like, if things don't work out with the pro day, what am I going to do? So, I was like, I need to get away from everything and just take a deep breath and let me go to England. I got a chance to go to Amsterdam, Venice. We were going to go to Switzerland and some other places, but, COVID affected things with travel. But having a plan, I was taking a deep breath and get my mind right, spiritually, mentally, physically, where I wanted to be at. And it worked out. I came into my first job with the right mindset. And I was like, what else can I challenge myself with? Because that's another thing, right? Because as student athletes, we're extremely competitive. So I'm like, you know what? I'm a big boy. I feel like I'm not a big boy at heart. I need to lose some weight. So I put it on myself to lose the weight. I think I was like, 275, 280. I got down to like 205, was doing the ketogenic diet, was running, lifting, eating very well. So that was something that I was relentlessly pursuing, so I'm making sure my mental is good. I'm making sure my physical is good. I'm making sure my spiritual is good with Bible study, things of that such, and just making sure that I'm coping with things the right way. Because that's a big transition. Some people don't do it that way.
So it sounds like a lot of the elements that you learned in athletics, you kind of took those pieces and implemented them in your personal and your professional life. What would you say the biggest lesson sports and athletics has taught you?
Man, the biggest lesson, I think my journey in being an athlete, it's had its ups and downs, right? There's always times where, even when I was first starting playing football, I had like really bad asthma. So we were doing wind sprints and I'm like gasping for air. I can barely breathe, blah, 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 acting all dramatic and stuff like that. And I thought like, this is just too much for me. Like I'm done with this. But persevering through times like that, fighting through, seeing results based on the work that you've done. And I think like kind of building like a mental callus of, I'm going to fight through everything that's put in front of me. I'm going to do it with intent. I'm going to do it with a plan, and I'm going to execute to my highest ability. I think that's kind of something that it's almost like a uncoachable that someone like me brings to the table, as an employee in the corporate world that other people don't have, that I've seen, because when you go through tough times, sometimes those situations aren't going to get better tomorrow. But when you handle tough times over and over and over again, you handle the next next tough time with better intent. You know what I'm saying? Those situations that are thrown at you, those adverse situations, maybe they won't be as easy in the moment, but when you're attacking them every single day, it gets easier or more feasible because you have faced so many tough adverse situations. So I would say that for sure.
Oh, that's good advice. That's nice. I read something somewhere where, one of the biggest gripes that employers are facing is the lack of soft skills. I honestly, to a lot of extent, believe some of those soft skills really are just uncoachable because they really are a matter about character. It's what's in you, and what's in you tends to come out. I'd like to touch on something that you mentioned. You mentioned you had a friend that was in Europe. You mentioned that your family supported you going to Eastern Michigan. You mentioned the support from the coaching staff. Project Transition recently launched a mentorship program called Project Success. And one of the elements that we realized in conducting some of the previous interviews, everybody talked about support, whether it was really good support or whether they lacked it as being very, very intricate in their success, right? Or their lack thereof. And so my question to you, considering just the sheer amount of support that you've had, how important is mentorship?
It's huge. That's something that I've always seeked out even when I was young, because when I was, sixth grade, I was playing with eighth graders, you know what I'm saying, when competing at that level. But I always viewed some of the older kids as my mentor. And I realized that anything you can do to grasp on and make a transition easier from someone who's been through it, that helps out. So talking to the older kids, talking to coaches who've been through it, talking to athletes who have already graduated or played professionally, or whether that's corporate world, people who have been through the ringer with experience. I think that picking their brain and figuring out the little nuggets that you can use to help your situation out, that's fantastic. I've always tried to seek out mentorship, and it does wonders for me. So I would encourage everyone to always try to do that in whatever transition they're making in life.
So how intricate was mentorship in your career trajectory? Because you're kind of young and you have a really big title.
One of my buddies that I grew up with, his family owns a tile subcontractor. So when I was working for a commercial builder, his pops, he helped me out to get to that position as project engineer at W.E. O'Neill. Having someone in my corner like that, mentoring me, and then also, his uncle, his brother, which is his uncle, my friend's uncle, he would take me out to different project sites, walk the sites, put me in front of superintendents, project executives, project managers. And that was big because he was like, look, Nick is here. You know what I'm saying? If you want to hire this kid, hire her, you know what I'm saying? And also told me what it's like in the workplace environment. What can I expect? What am I going to like, potentially not like? So that's huge. That's huge. And I think it definitely helped me get into one of the best builders in Chicagoland area. And then also after that, getting my MBA, I had a mentor at Hines, which is a large general partner fund. They're a developer, for lack of better words. And one of their directors is my mentor to this day. Actually, two of them are my mentors to this day. When they kind of laid the foundation of how I can get educated to get into the development space, to get into the private equity space, what type of things do I need to pack my tool bag with, whether it's on the quantitative side, learning Excel modeling, things of that such. And they just really helped me, lay the foundation and pave the road for me to succeed upon. And without them, I don't know where I'd be at in terms of where I'd see my career. Ultimately led me to get my MBA in real estate finance, which I'm very grateful for.
Oh, that's lovely. Mentorship is definitely important. Networking is definitely important. I used to always say, people kind of have networking, they kind of have it wrong. People think networking is about who you know, right? And then I had a friend that was like, oh, networking is about who knows you. And I'm like, yeah, I disagree. Networking really is about who sees your potential and who sees your value and who can match your value with opportunity. And it sounds like you had the right people in your corner, and hopefully everyone can be fortunate enough to get into your space where they have those people who can place them in those type of opportunities. I'm glad that happened for you. So you mentioned your back and injuries associated with you being undersized and playing football. And back injuries, especially when you start talking about discs, tend to be nagging, long, chronic injuries. What kind of impact did that have on your career?
I think that I was very thankful at Eastern Michigan to have a great, training staff that put me through rehab, that really strengthened the muscles around my back. That was really big because without that, probably would have lingered a little bit longer. But there was days where especially right after I heard it, you got numbness sand tingling down your leg and you're dragging your leg and stuff like that. So that's pretty scary. So I remember when they told me like my season was over, and I'm like, what? Like, what are you talking about? I just got here. So having a great training staff to help progress me and make me stronger, that was very big. But, as soon as I got, healthy again, I faced another hurdle because I decided to transfer, and some of these schools, well, all of them asked for my medical history, right? So I had to give them the MRI. Obviously, it said desiccated herniated disc. I have a ton of offers. Some of them took their offers away. They're like, we can't take this risk. So that was another challenge. But ultimately, going through that physical therapy at Eastern Michigan, and also I had a great off-season training program with a facility called EFT, where they train a bunch of professional athletes, a bunch of college athletes, and they helped me out tremendously with my athleticism, getting back to bending the way I can bend. I'm turning the quarter to getting to the quarterback, or making a play on the running back who's trying to bounce the ball outside. Having that dynamic training atmosphere was huge for me. So a combination of Eastern Michigan's training staff, EFT's football training, that was exactly what I needed. Put me in a meal plan, which was great. And then ultimately, my whole time at University of Albany, it didn't bother me at all, which was great. Some people face worse outcomes, but not for me. So I was very thankful for that.
Was there any point that you felt like, okay, this may affect me for the rest of my life?
Yeah, as soon as I got hurt at Eastern Michigan, I was just scared, you know what I'm saying? Because they show you the MRI or the X-ray or whatever it might be, and you see your discs that are desiccated. It's like, imagine like a jelly donut and it's just smushed. You see like 3 of those, and you're like, because you're scared, you know what I'm saying? I'm just a kid, I don't know much about that. So when you see that, it's tough because you put in so much work all your life, and you're like, we're trying to get to the league, doing all this stuff, and when they tell you, something that has happened to you is prohibiting you from doing that, it's a lot on you. So you get a little scared, but then you start to educate yourself. You start to realize what physical therapy can do for you. Then you see results. You're starting to get, strengthen yourself. And then, I'm starting to run again. I'm starting to lift again. I'm starting to jump again. And I'm feeling good. That propelled me from my confidence of like, maybe I can't put 500 pounds on my back, but I can do other exercises, whether it's split squat, dumbbell step ups, things of that such, to get me ready for the season and just ready to go.
So I'm an athletic trainer by trade. It's my first career. I've worked in the injury prevention and ergonomic space. And so for a lot of individuals in the workplace, you do see them with those type of injuries. It's not necessarily uncommon. But what advice would you have for an athlete who's transitioning from their athletic career into the workplace to help them as it relates to work hardening, work conditioning, things of that nature?
Transitioning into the workplace, for me, it was tough at first, because it's like you go from one environment of, I got 70 or 80 brothers in the locker room. You got built-in friends, for lack of better words, coaching staff. Obviously, you have to be productive on the field. From going from that to like, I'm making money to put food on the table or to pay the bills. I don't know any of these people. Very corporate, very structured environment. So that transition is different, first and foremost. And I think that just understanding that it is going to take some time, and understanding that you can also take a lot of what you have been through in your life and implement it in your day-to-day job. So I remember my first project, we built like a 250 unit apartment complex in the suburbs. And I would share like a workspace with my project executive. So I was reporting to him all the time. And, I asked him, I'm like, his name was Brian. I'm like, Brian, what kind of motivates you every day? And I'm just curious because we talk about mentorship, and I'm trying to get him to mentor me, to pick his brain. And then he was like, honestly, Nick, like, I love to compete, and I love to wake up and compete every single day and drive project revenue and do all these things and the camaraderie. And I'm like, he just sounds like a football coach talking to me. And I'm just like, wow. And it kind of clicked. And I'm just like, I need to go harder. You know what I'm saying? I need to work better, and I need to have my plans. I need to get organized, things of that such. Because the same way I attacked my day, like on a day-to-day schedule, when I was being a student athlete, I can do the same thing in the corporate world. So using those practices and tactics and processes that you learn when you're a student athlete and implementing them in a day-to-day work atmosphere, that is something that really helped me. So for the transition, I would say use that 100%, because you aren't going to have a text message that is sent out to you saying, we got meetings at 6 a.m., training staff at this time, practice, blah, blah, school. You know what I'm saying? You don't have that structure from a sense of people people sending it to you. So you got to create that for yourself. But utilizing what they have given you when you're a student athlete and bringing that to your professional life, that is something that is huge. And I did it for myself. And I think it was definitely helped me be successful.
Nice. What nuggets will you give athletes transitioning from athletics to their career? From the physical perspective of transitioning from athletics with injuries and preparing yourself physically for your career in the workplace.
My transition was more like, I'm a project manager. I'm dealing with the gross profit analysis. I'm executing change orders, executing contracts, things of that such. But nevertheless, you are on site. You are taking site walks. You are doing a good amount of physical activity. For me, I wanted to make sure I had all my ducks in a line with where I was at mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And what does that mean? That means making sure you're healthy, making sure you're hydrating well, things of that such. Everything that they were teaching us when we were student athletes, right? So I made sure that I was done with PT. I made sure that I was, healthy. I made sure that I was getting all my checkups, appointments, things of that such. I was feeling good where I was at with my weight, right? Because I didn't want to be 280 pounds anymore. I wanted to be 205. So making sure that, I was doing that and having all my ducks in a line and ready to go. And that way, it's almost like your off season, right? Your off season preparing for your season, which was working in whatever field you get into. So I really made sure that I was prepared that way, making sure the transition was as seamless as I could possibly make it.
Good deal. So your weight loss had a profound effect on your ability to perform in a lot of different areas, is what it sounds like.
I would say so, not necessarily in the workplace, but just getting to my lifelong goals of when you're a kid, you're a big dude, sometimes you can be self-conscious, you know what I'm saying? So I've dealt with that my whole entire life. And I was like, man, I don't want to feel that way. I want to be able to go to the pool. I want to be able to go to the beach, things of that such, and be confident with myself. When I lost that weight, it was great for me because I finally didn't have that feeling. So that was big for me. And then just going into the workplace, just having that confidence, additional confidence. I'm already a natural confident person, I think. And that additional confidence, it helped out tremendously.
That's awesome. Well, Nick, do you have any nuggets that you want to leave?
I would just say for those, who are in a student athlete position right now and maybe haven't made it professionally or decided, not to do the professional route, remind yourself that, like I said at the beginning of the interview, you could be in the league for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. You still got to do something with your life after. Right? So this is just, don't think of like you didn't make it. This is just another part of the journey where you can be super successful, even more successful than you were when you were a student athlete in college or professional, if you're a professional transitioning into the corporate world or your desk job, whatever it might be. It's just another opportunity. I think for me, when I first started out, it was like, oh man, I'm kind of taking a step back, but it's not about that. It's about a new journey. What can I accomplish now? What can I create for myself? What's my 5 to 10 year plan? What is the life I can make for myself? So I think that's a great mindset to have.
Well, thank you so much. I am Dr. LaKendra Red Smith. Thank you, Nick Dillon, for showing up and interviewing with us today. This concludes our interview. Check him out on his socials and check us out at ptransition.org and also follow Project Transition on all of our socials. Thank you.
Thank you.